Shall we launch
Yes,
into
let's
this?
do it.
Seeing as
Let's
I
do
gotta
it.
catch a train. So Popper 17. Woohoo! Welcome
Oh my
back from
god.
our break. Not too
A
much of a
mini
break for
break.
you though. You've been busy.
Well, hey, a break from learning one proper etude every week is a break. So no
Yeah,
matter what else you're doing during
totes.
the week, it did feel like a bit of a rest. So yes, happy days.
Yeah, I hear
How's
you.
your week
I
off?
hear you. Yeah, it was really good. It was really good.
Yeah,
Same thing. I mean, I feel like we've done enough of them now,
yeah,
nonstop, that we really felt like we achieved something. And it
big
was,
time.
it's important to give yourself a break, I think, as well. It's really important for learning. Can't
Yes,
emphasize that enough.
100%. Let your subconscious work on all that goodness that we've been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what do you think? So, obviously, this is a double stoppy one. What were your
Yeah.
thoughts, Alva?
You know me, I always have lots of thoughts. This, because it's a one pager, you could be tricked into thinking that this actually is simple enough and it's quite lyrical, so you're like all enjoying yourself while you're playing it, happy days. But really, to be 100% centered on every single note, tuning wise, first off the bat, there are a lot of things that have to go into it, right? So, even the first bar, so that second semiquaver, I noticed that even though you really want it to actually be flowing in da 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 if you're thinking musically about it, but you still need to have a certain amount of weight on the. If you don't actually do a bounce change, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, great point there. Actually, it's so much about I think balance and weight in the left hand. So I found, in the second bar, and of course we can talk about how to practice double stops. But in some of these passages, it can feel like you have two left feet with your bow or something in these. It's a coordination plus legato plus the bow control thing, and I think it's such a genius study in a way because we have this contrasting middle section and the forte opening. That's con brio. I mean, I'm interpreting con brio as much more of a character than a tempo in this one, but
Me too.
it's yeah. I found what's really interesting about the first section is the how the dynamic and the energy really affects your ability to coordinate those double stops. So it's really tempting because it's forte to use a lot of weight to get those to speak, but it needs to be quite light in the left hand while being completely accurate, as you said, with those shifts really kind of bouncing,
So it
releasing in
comes back
between
to
each one.
things like Popper 13 when we talked about releasing as we actually do an octave shift. The same thing applies that when you're doing your double stops, that every single one has a little bit of release, or else the hand is too tense, it's too much weight, and then you get stuck and sloppy. So even I just found it fascinating. I had a look at a few people playing it online, and some people did this weird sound, which I certainly didn't take from this piece. It should be all legato, right? The last one I didn't have legato there, but it should be just one legato line.
Yeah,
and
to be is there maybe there's multiple editions or something where they don't do that. I mean, I think that's one of the great opportunities of this study to practice your legato, because that is so hard to do, legato, that passage.
Yes.
Whereas if you're doing stoppy starty, it's not. Go on. No, go ahead.
Stoppy starty, I did not practice it like that, and I should have actually. But the big challenge for me, I noticed, was my coordination when you don't have a finger that transfers naturally. So if we say fine, and then so timing that. Did you do 1 3 3 4?
I did, yes. It's that string crossing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a string crossing, so you really have to leave it as late as possible for it to sound really legato. Last possible second. and then it's much clearer. I do know some people, because nerdy cello chats here, some people just change the fingering so that they have some option. I don't know what they did, like maybe put in an extra shift, and obviously that's easier.
Yeah, it is, but
we're trying to practice the techniques in here that they have. So you've got that kind of connection, which happens here as well. Here, that last one. And I often find that at the end of my big legato run, I lose concentration then, because I'm patting myself on the back for getting everything in tune, and then of course that coordination catches me out. The rest of it is totally fine. As you get there, so it's super easy.
I find there too, because you're concentrating so hard in that first slur to be legato, that I need to remind myself when I get here to actually release, both for the clarity of, you know, the sound. I mean, there's so much resonance when you play it on two strings. That's an example of how the bow can really get in the way of the clarity of the left hand, you know, finding these places where you can release. And I was going to ask you, so when you've talked about that 1-3 to 3-4 business and changing it to the last minute, I was going to ask you, do you actually lift the third finger just really late, or do you kind of slide it over? Because those are two things I was thinking about.
Yeah, and obviously in the Bach, when we do the... What's that last one? That's a classic, you know, slidey over or transfer, which do you want to do?
Yeah.
For me, I definitely just did late. So if I time it perfectly, it sounds very clear. If I even half the amount of time, it's not going to be clear. So it is. Which did you do?
Yeah, I think I did the same. And I think you can get away with it in this passage because it's so, well, it's pretty fast, isn't it? I mean, something like in the middle section when you have the... That one is very difficult. And I think, for me anyway, I kind of have to just jump. My finger doesn't really slide over that way.
I jumped there as well, and that's where I noticed if I managed to convince myself, go. If I do it with giving myself an actual timing, it's the same as a shift. Go. It'll always work when I time it. When I don't, and I just chance my arm. No.
Speaking of timing, I found, and you know, obviously, like all of these can be practiced with metronome, but I found that the timing, what you're talking about with this, is I did this really slowly with the metronome. I think maybe starting at like 60 per quaver beat. And I think there's a big difference between doing that, as I just demonstrated, without a metronome and with a metronome, because it really forces you to be completely accurate with that timing thing you're talking about. And can't slow practice for everything. Martin talked about that a lot in his video, but it's just so, like, you know, it transfers even if you don't have time to like work it up from really slow till fast. I think it's so beneficial to do that kind of practice.
Absolutely. And then also thinking about the bow legato there, because obviously it's very easy when you're doing the metronome to go, you know, and do kind of lightning off bow, but really for this to sound truly legato. So your bow has to be the same speed, and even though you're not concentrating on it, it really... And I can even see when I'm doing that, some of them are moving a bit faster because I'm like, whoa, you know. So practicing, I mean, we can all cheat because we've already done that practice for years already.
Yes.
So you can kind of say, okay, now I need to save, but ideally, exactly the same speed of bow and consistency. No release in between the two to really get your legato in there.
Yeah, super advice. I think one good thing we should, I don't know, it's not really related, but I think we should talk about it because it's all over this study, is how you break down practicing double stops. Because obviously we've touched on this on lots of videos, but I think things we could both agree on, right, is you almost always want to start from the lower note and tune from the lower note, right?
Yes.
I don't know if that's like a rule as such for thirds and stuff, but definitely for sixths, I would 100% always start from the lower note. And
I think the whole point of that is because, let's say you're playing in a string quartet, when you're actually trying to tune a chord with a string quartet, you always want to have a slightly more on the bass of the harmony, so that everyone else builds up the end on top of that. So if you're too light, people can't hear the resonances that they need to join in with to get your perfect tuning chord, right? And this whole thing of you want to have your tonics and your fifths stronger than your thirds, depending on whether you're major or minor, that type of idea. So it's always going to be the bass note for tuning, for that reason, but also for the reason that you don't want to actually ever be moving two fingers at the same time, because that's just way too confusing. And I was crying laughing because, having said that, the very last one, there is one moment where you have to do your whatever it is, 10th, and
the 10th,
both fingers come back to the octave. Like, you never do that on cello. It's so funny.
I know.
And there's always one finger that's your lazy finger, because it's just like, my thumb getting back.
Yes.
It was like, I have to move the lower note.
It's one of those things that's so uncommon that it is really just a question of a lot of repetition and rote and muscle memory, that because it's just, as you say, very uncellistic to do that.
What else about the double stops? Obviously, if you want to do just play on one string. So I've got my new headphones today, and I haven't figured out how to actually put them in my ear yet. So this is why I keep twiddling with my ear, because I literally don't know how they go in them yet. So what you do is you actually do the fingering for both, and then just play the bottom. Even that, I mean, I didn't practice it like that, which I should have during the week, because then I wouldn't have been exposed right now. But that would have been a really helpful one. And then the same on top. This one. And that would have actually practiced how to get that open A not jutting out. There's just so many levels to being in that,
The thing I love about that sort of practice is it really also helps you find the balance in the hand, right? Because for those first four notes, we actually do need to change a little bit the balance, and if it's over the third finger or if it's over the two, and that will really affect the consistency of the intonation. And speaking of that whole thing you were talking about with, not getting the A to jut out and stuff like that, another place I thought was really tricky for that was it here? That bit, getting the balance right with the strings. It's so easy to do. Or not getting all those notes to speak.
Yeah.
Right. Another one is
coming out or not. Yeah.
Yes. Totally. The other place is those places where you need to be closer in a way to the bridge, because you're that much further from the open string. But and that is the melody line. But do you want it to stick up that much? It's always a compromise of weight and between the strings and all that.
Exactly. So you can give yourself a percentage of. I find people find it easier when you say, okay, 75% A string, 25% D string. That's what you're going to aim for in this area. So that you're actually doing the lean the way you want it. And then to also listen to whatever line. If you physically focus in just by listening, you will automatically bring that line out, which I think
Yeah.
people often forget. You're just kind
Yeah.
of listening to the chordal structure of it all, whereas if you then, having done that practice, go back and listen to the line you want to bring out, naturally your brain's going to do it for you.
It's a very important point, actually, something I said today when I was teaching. But it's that whole thing, right? We talk so much about technique and how to control what we're doing. But ultimately, like, you have to hear what you want to create. And I think sometimes there's a process that happens that you're trying to achieve a certain sound. And just knowing, as you say, that you want to hear that top line is going to change the way you play it. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect the first time, and then you might have to step back, analyze technically what you're doing. But you can't, I mean, in my experience anyway, you can't just all be one or the other. It's always a balance. So I think it's really important that you mentioned that.
And also thinking about that sometimes people leave the musical aspect too late in the process. So yeah. I find sometimes people go, okay, 6, how do I do these? Okay, lovely, I have this. But actually, if you're thinking about how you want to play it musically later, that's actually going to probably change your weight balance of a lot of things. So the earlier, that was something that I learned as I was later on in my cello career, was use the musical phrase from the start, because otherwise you're giving yourself an extra layer of work and nobody has time for that. Not when you're a professional, so you need to cut out
you're the master of efficiency. You're the master of efficiency, Ailbhe. It's coming from the horse's mouth.
Well, that proved that I never once played the con brio the second time round.
Yeah.
You know? Why would I?
Well, it's a good point. It's a good point, because this is one where it's not really long enough to need to worry that much about the endurance aspect, you know? I mean, definitely if you were playing this in a concert, you would want to play through maybe the whole thing in the dress rehearsal. So you have the experience of performing the whole thing. But I don't, you know, famous last words, let's see when we play it through. I don't think I'm going to be completely knackered by the time I finish that middle section. So yeah.
No.
Yeah,
and
totally.
If this was a 3-page popper, which some of them are, those ones, of course, just to know, can I actually get to the end physically? Those ones I'd have to play. Whereas time is money, and this month is, a lot of concert dates, so Popper is going to get chopped.
Chopped Popper.
Sorry, Popper. Yeah. What about even when we're getting from this, I found that string crossing, how do you get the circular effect to land on 2 strings at the same time? You have to stroke, right? And then be down. So getting from a harmonic onto there's a lot of things going on in just that one bar. Totally.
And again, bow distribution, it's so tempting to go and use a ton of bow to get that with the control. It's also very hard to go from open strings to fingered strings legato in this sort of thing, you know, even as you I mean, that's another point, actually, that we haven't brought up yet, is that when you're doing all of this, you know, it can be really tempting to, you know, practice in this way that feels articulated. But I think you're going to have a much better time if you can keep your fingers really close to the string in this one.
Yeah. And how much weight, can you just put enough weight on that it all sounds perfectly clear, but not that you're forcing yourself in, because double stops do get tiring. Let's say this was in the middle of a concerto. You don't want to be wasting excess energy that you don't need to use.
Plus, it's just a question of, you won't be able to speak, those notes won't, I mean, I found that even in the second bar, if I played with too much force, it doesn't work, you know, you have to release, and you have to keep that lightness. It's kind of like, you can't just bully your way through that one. You have to have this, you know, step back mindfulness.
Exactly.
Totally.
And what did you think about the actually the ninths, or what are they, tenths? The tenths. weight onto the...
Well, it's funny because I read that like really complicated description in the Popper, the Baron edition. It was so funny because it took me like 10 minutes to figure out what they're trying to say. I'm like, some things are better, just like demonstrated. It was very technical, but I think what they were trying to talk about was how you make that connect at legato without it sounding really slurpy and horrible. And I think what they were advising is that you sort of put your third finger down and slide while you're putting kind of just very, very quickly transferring the weight only to the D to hide that. Which I think is what I would do anyway without analyzing it that way. So I kind of prepare beforehand. Here my weight is more balanced, I would say, on the thumb. The first finger is sort of a pivot point. But I think it's important to tell people when you're doing this, right? It can look like your hand is doing this crazy stretch, but it absolutely is coming from the arm. Yes.
Funny you should mention that, because I did try it that way. And I just thought the execution for me was, I just don't want to hear any slurp. I don't want to hear any slurp at this moment. So for me, stretch and go was the way I did it. So keep the weight down. So just throw.
Yeah.
And try and get the weight over fast enough. So same thing again. So if I time it late enough, then it sounds very legato. And more so, now again, concentration, timing, all of these things involved. Just the slurpy method didn't work for me, but it seems to work very nicely for you.
Oh, well, let's see. Let's see in context. It is one of those things, though. It's great. We have options as cellists. And to be fair, like, I should really practice it more that way because that feels more uncomfortable to me. But it's good to have both skills.
Yeah, and that's the problem is you can't stop the bow. There goes my headphone again. I can't believe it. Sorry, you can't stop the bow. So I actually just rotate my hand, so you can't even move. And my finger will actually just rock over at its full extension. So when I'm on the first finger, I already expand kind of like an extension. Same thing. So ideally you want to leave everything as late as possible so you don't hear either any this or any of this. So and then the other option is to do the stretch that I'm doing but no bow stop in it. That took me a while to verbalize.
No. Well, it took them a while to explain it in the written version. I was like,
we're all in the same boat. And they print
we are.
There's no print in this.
No. This is all in living color.
I love it.
Yeah.
Right.
Should we have a go? I think we should.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Why, thank you.
Oh, it's so nice to hear you after not hearing you for a few weeks. Really?
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
Thank you.
That bass sound, that raw. I'm like, yeah, that's what a cello should sound like.
I couldn't resist. I was like, this is not tasteful, but God, it feels good.
Sometimes you gotta, you know. How many people can say that about Popper?
Oh,
God, it feels good.
There's so much resonance. Like, our whole body is like going.
Oh, yeah.
Woo! Nice job.
I gotta say, it's one of those ones. It doesn't look that bad. And even before you came on, I was like, yeah, I'm ready to do this one. I'm ready. And it's like, man, no, these little short ones that don't look like they'd be that hard. They're deceivingly difficult, you know, to play it really, really well is
no,
deceivingly
it's one
hard.
of those things, or just even we didn't really talk even so much about doing something like this, and then
how
do we get? I definitely have to find my C there just to make sure that I'm totally centered in my hand position when I start.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So,
I know.
Very cool. Oh, lovely. Lots of great heart in there as well, and nice, beautiful sounds happening.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Yeah, super. Woohoo! Yay. Well, nice to see you again. Woohoo! Welcome back.
Absolutely.
And yeah,
yes.
I'll see you next week for our special guest. Yeah, with 18, and
I know.
Lynn is
Super
joining
exciting.
us for that. Yeah. Woohoo!
Cool.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.